The sky above Zephyr's Prime burned orange and red as the Korthak warships rained death from above. Elder scientist Veltar pressed her face against the cracked window of her laboratory, watching her beautiful world die. The peaceful gardens that had covered her planet for thousands of years were now nothing but ash and smoke. "Elder, we must evacuate," shouted her assistant, Krendo, as another explosion shook their building. Dust fell from the ceiling like snow. Veltar shook her head, slowly. Her blue skin had turned pale with fear, but her eyes held determination. "No, Krendo. There is something I must do first." The Korthak Empire had arrived 3 days ago. They came without warning, without demands for surrender. They simply began destroying everything. The Zephyrians had tried to fight back, but their peaceful society had no real weapons. Their ships were built for exploration, not war. Their people were scientists and artists, not soldiers. Now their orbital defenses were gone. Their cities were burning. Their people were dying. Veltar walked to her communication console with shaking hands. The ancient device had not been used in over 500 years. Her people had forbidden its use after the last time they sent the signal. That time, nothing had answered. This time, she prayed something would. "Elder, what are you doing?" Krendo asked. His voice was full of fear. "I'm sending the old signal," Veltar replied. "The one that reaches into the dead zone." Krendo's eyes went wide. The dead zone was the part of space where no civilized species lived. It was empty, cold, and dangerous. Ships that went there never came back. The few that did return brought stories of worlds where everything tried to kill you, where the very air was poison. "But Elder, nothing good lives in the dead zone. The stories say many things," Veltar interrupted. "But right now, the monsters outside our door are real. Maybe the monsters in the dead zone will fight them." She began typing on the old keyboard. The signal was simple but powerful. It would tell anyone who received it that a peaceful world was dying. It would show them pictures of Zephyrian families, their art, their music. It would beg for help from anyone who might listen. The building shook again. Through the window, Veltar could see Korthak ground troops moving through the streets. They were huge creatures twice the size of Zephyrians with thick armor and powerful weapons. They killed everything they saw. "Please," Veltar whispered, as she finished the message. "Someone, anyone, please help us." She pressed the send button. Far away in the cold darkness of space, the signal traveled faster than light. It passed dead worlds and empty systems. It crossed the boundary into the region that civilized species call the Dead Zone. On a space station orbiting a small blue and green world, Admiral Sarah Chen was finishing her morning coffee when the communication officer called her. "Admiral, we're receiving an unknown signal. It's not from any human colony." Admiral Chen was a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years protecting human space from pirates and raiders. She had seen many battles and made many hard choices. "Put it on the main screen," she ordered. The signal appeared on the large display. It showed a world of incredible beauty, floating cities among purple trees, crystal lakes that reflected rainbow skies, and people with blue skin who looked peaceful and kind. Then the image changed. Now it showed those same cities burning. The peaceful people were running and screaming as huge armored creatures hunted them down. Children cried for their parents. Parents died protecting their young. The message was simple. "Please help us. We are dying. Our world is Zephyr's Prime in the Andromeda Spiral. We do not know if anyone will hear this, but if you do, please remember us." The bridge was silent for a long moment. Admiral Chen felt something cold and angry growing in her chest. These were not soldiers dying in battle. These were innocent people being slaughtered. "Where did this come from?" she asked. "The Andromeda Spiral, Admiral. It's about 6 months away at maximum hyperspace speed." "And what do we know about the attackers?" The intelligence officer spoke up. "The Korthak Empire, Admiral. We have files on them. They've conquered 12 worlds in the past 50 years. They don't take prisoners. They don't accept surrender. They just destroy everything and take what they want." Admiral Chen stared at the images of dying children on the screen. Her own daughter had died in the Mars colony attack 20 years ago. She remembered the feeling of helplessness, of being too far away to save the people she loved. "Send a message to Earth Command," she ordered. "Tell them we need to call a council of war, emergency level." "Admiral?" the communication officer asked. "What should I tell them it's about?" Admiral Chen looked at the screen one more time. The last image showed a Zephyrian child reaching for her mother, who would never reach back. "Tell them it's about pirates who kill children," she said. Tell them it's time to remind the galaxy why they fear the dead zone. 6 hours later, Admiral Chen stood in the war room of Earth Command. Around the table sat the most dangerous humans in the galaxy, admirals who had fought in the Titan Wars, generals who had survived the Europa ice campaigns, and intelligence officers who knew every secret weapon humanity had built. On the screen, the Zephyrian message played again. No one spoke until it finished. "How many ships can we get?" asked Admiral Chen. General Martinez, a scarred veteran of the Mars campaign, consulted his tablet. "If we pull from every base, every patrol, every hidden depot, maybe 800 ships." 800 against the entire Korthak Empire? Someone asked. Admiral Chen smiled, but it was not a kind smile. The Korthak Empire has never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. She pointed to the image of the burning Zephyrian cities. Those people sent their message into the dead zone because they had no hope left. They called us monsters because that's what they needed, monsters to fight other monsters. She looked around the table at the hardest, most experienced fighters humanity had ever produced. Let's show them what monsters can do when children are in danger. The orders went out within an hour. Across human space, ships began moving toward assembly points. From hidden bases and asteroid fields, from the dark side of moons, from the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres where only humans could survive, the fleet began to form. It would be the largest human fleet in history. 800 ships crewed by people who had learned to fight on a world that tried to kill them every day. People who had survived ice ages and meteor strikes, plagues and wars. People who had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. The Korthak Empire had made a mistake. They had hurt innocents, and they had done it where humans could see. Now the children of Earth were coming, and they were very, very angry. Back on Zephys Prime, Elder Veltar huddled in the ruins of her laboratory. The building had been hit again, and most of the equipment was destroyed, but the old communication device still worked. She did not know if anyone had received her message. She did not know if help would come, but she had tried. That was all she could do. Outside, the Korthak continued their slaughter. But high above, in the cold darkness of space, something was coming. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The children of the dead zone were about to introduce themselves to the universe. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Terran Fury, watching the largest human fleet in history assemble before her. Ships filled the space around Earth's moon like angry wasps gathering for war. She had seen many fleets in her 30 years of service, but nothing like this. "Final count, Admiral," reported Commander Hayes, her second-in-command. 812 ships total. Everything from scout frigates to heavy dreadnoughts. Chen nodded, still staring at the massive display showing their forces. Each ship represented hundreds of human lives, people who had volunteered to travel 6 months through hyperspace to help strangers they had never met. "And the crews?" she asked. "All volunteers, Admiral. We actually had to turn people away. It seems the message from Zephys Prime hit a nerve." Chen understood why. She had watched the Zephyrian distress signal dozens of times now, and each viewing made her angrier. The images of families being torn apart, of children crying for parents who would never answer, reminded every human of their own worst memories. Humanity had not reached the stars easily. They had survived ice ages that killed most life on their planet. They had endured plagues that reduced their population to a few thousand. They had fought wars that nearly destroyed their civilization. But through it all, they had protected their children. The Korthak Empire had broken that most sacred rule. "Admiral, incoming message from Earth Command," the communication officer announced. The face of Admiral Rodriguez, head of the Earth Defense Force, appeared on the screen. He looked tired but determined. "Sarah, the President has given you full authority for this mission. Whatever you need, whatever it takes. The Korthak Empire ends now." "Understood, Admiral. What about the other galactic powers? Any word on support?" Rodriguez shook his head. "The Altarians say it's not their problem. The Centauri Union is deeply concerned but won't act. The Trade Federation is worried about their shipping routes. As usual, we're on our own." Chen was not surprised. The galaxy was full of civilized species who preferred to talk about problems rather than solve them. They had committees for everything and committees to discuss those committees. While they talked, people died. "That's fine," Chen said. "We work better alone anyway." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Give them hell, Sarah. Show them why we earned the name Deathworlders." The connection ended, and Chen turned to address her fleet. The communication channel opened to all 800 ships. "This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. In 1 hour, we begin the longest hyperspace jump in human history. Our destination is Zephys Prime, where innocent people are dying while we speak." She paused, looking out at the assembled fleet. Each ship held brave men and women who had left their families to answer a cry for help from across the galaxy. "The enemy is the Korthak Empire. Our intelligence says they have conquered 12 worlds in 50 years. They don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners, they simply destroy everything in their path." On ships throughout the fleet, human crews listened with growing anger. These were people who had grown up on stories of ancient Earth, where humans had fought to protect the innocent against overwhelming odds. "The Korthak think they know war," Chen continued. "They think their size and armor make them invincible, but they have never fought humans before. They don't know that we learned to fight on a world that tried to kill us every day." In the engineering sections of the fleet, technicians made final checks on weapons systems. In the marine bays, soldiers cleaned their rifles and sharpened their knives. In the fighter hangars, pilots ran through combat simulations. They don't know that we survived the Martian Rebellion, where we fought in tunnels so small we had to crawl. They don't know about the Europa Ice Wars, where we fought battles in temperatures that would freeze their blood. They don't know about Titan, where we learned to fight in methane storms that would melt their armor. Chen's voice grew harder with each word. Around the fleet, crews felt the familiar fire building in their chests, the same fire that had driven their ancestors to climb down from the trees and challenge creatures 10 times their size. But most importantly, they don't know what happens when humans see children in danger. They think we're just another civilized species that will file a complaint and send a diplomatic note. She looked directly into the camera, and her eyes were cold as space. They're about to learn differently. The fleet began moving, ships arranging themselves in hyperspace formation. It was not like the neat, orderly formations that other species used. Human fleet tactics had been developed by people who learned to hunt in packs, who surrounded their prey and struck from unexpected angles. "Jump in 60 seconds, announced the navigation officer. Chen thought about the Zephyrian message one more time. She thought about Elder Veltar, the brave scientist who had sent the signal. She thought about the children hiding in burning cities, waiting for help that might never come. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember why they call us Deathworlders, and remember that somewhere out there, innocent people are counting on us." The hyperspace countdown reached 0. 800 human. Warships disappeared into the darkness between stars. The journey to Zephys Prime would take 6 months. During that time, the fleet trained constantly. Human Marines practiced combat techniques that would have horrified other species, fighting in zero gravity, in toxic atmospheres, in conditions that would kill most galactic life forms. The ship captains studied Korthak tactics and found them predictable. The Empire had grown lazy after decades of easy conquests. They relied on overwhelming firepower and intimidation. They had never faced an enemy that could adapt and improvise. Admiral Chen spent her time planning the battle. The Korthak fleet was larger than hers, but size was not everything. Human ships were built differently than those of other species. They were tougher, faster, and designed by people who understood that sometimes you had to take damage to win. Most importantly, human crews were different. They came from a world where cooperation meant survival, where protecting the group was more important than individual safety, where the right thing to do was worth dying for. As the fleet traveled through hyperspace, stories began to spread among the ships. Stories of Earth's history, of humans who had stood against impossible odds to protect the innocent. Stories of soldiers who had held the line when retreat meant leaving civilians to die. The crew of the Terran Fury learned about Admiral Chen's own story, how she had lost her daughter in the Mars attack, how she had spent 20 years making sure no other parent would feel that loss, how she had volunteered for the most dangerous missions because someone had to stand between the monsters and the innocent. By the time the fleet was ready to drop out of hyperspace at Zephys Prime, they were no longer just 800 separate ships. They were a pack, united by purpose and fury. They were the children of Earth, coming to collect a debt that had been written in innocent blood. The Korthak Empire had 6 months to enjoy their conquest of Zephys Prime. Their time was almost up. Deep in the flagship's planning room, Admiral Chen made final preparations for battle. The Korthak would outnumber them, outgun them, and have the advantage of defending a fixed position. Under normal circumstances, it would be suicide to attack. But Admiral Chen was not planning a normal attack. She was planning something the galaxy had never seen before. 800 ships full of humans who had learned that sometimes the only way to save innocent lives was to become the monsters that other monsters feared. The Korthak Empire was about to discover why the rest of the galaxy called the region around Earth the Dead Zone. It was not because nothing lived there, it was because nothing that threatened human children lived there for very long. Warlord Gixeval stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Talon, admiring his conquest. Below him, Cephas Prime burned beautifully. The purple forests were now black ash. The crystal cities were now rubble. The peaceful Zephyrians were now properly enslaved or dead. Warlord, called his communications officer, were detecting hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. Gixeval barely looked up from his victory display. Probably more refugees, trying to escape. Destroy them. Sir, the signatures are unusual. There are many of them, perhaps 800 ships. Now Gixeval turned. 800 ships was a significant force even for the Korthak Empire. Show me. The main screen flickered to life, showing the edge of the Zephy system. Space rippled and tore as ships dropped out of hyperspace. But these were not Korthak vessels, nor any design that Gixeval recognized. The ships were smaller than he expected, built with strange angles and odd proportions. They moved in patterns that made no sense, scattered like debris rather than arranged in proper military formations. Their hulls were dark and scarred, as if they had seen many battles. What are these primitive vessels? Gixeval asked. Are they Altarian? Centauri? His intelligence officer studied the scanner readings. Unknown, Warlord. The designs are not in our database, but they're broadcasting a signal. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was cold and calm, speaking in simple galactic standard. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Fleet. Korthak vessels, you are ordered to cease all hostile actions immediately and prepare to surrender for war crimes trials. Gixeval laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Terran? I have never heard of this species. Tell this admiral that the Korthak Empire does not surrender to primitives. The human ships continued their strange movement patterns, spreading throughout the system like drops of oil on water. They seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Warlord, his tactical officer reported. They're using the asteroid field as cover. Their formations are completely chaotic. Good, Gixeval snarled. Chaos makes them easy to destroy. Signal the fleet. Advance in standard formation. Crush these insects. The Korthak fleet moved forward in perfect order, their massive ships arranged in neat rows like the military parades they loved. Each ship was twice the size of the human vessels, armed with heavy plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor. But as they advanced, something strange happened. The human ships did not retreat. Instead, they began to move faster, darting between asteroids like small predators hunting much larger prey. Sir, they're moving into the asteroid belt, reported the tactical officer. Should we follow? Gixeval hesitated. The asteroid field was dangerous, full of spinning rocks and gravitational anomalies. Proper military doctrine said to stay in open space where large ships could maneuver safely. They're trying to hide, he decided. Signal the fleet. Enter the asteroid field. Flush them out. As the Korthak ships moved into the belt, the humans struck. It was not like any battle Gixeval had ever seen. Instead of facing them directly, the human ships attacked from every direction at once. They used the asteroids themselves as weapons, pushing large rocks into the paths of Korthak vessels. They fired from behind cover, then disappeared before return fire could reach them. What are they doing? Gixeval demanded as his ships tried to respond to attacks coming from 12 different directions. They're hunting us, the tactical officer said in amazement, like pack predators surrounding prey. A human destroyer appeared from behind a large asteroid, fired a spread of missiles at a Korthak cruiser, then vanished again before the cruiser could target it. The missiles were not the advanced energy weapons that most species used, but simple kinetic projectiles that hit like hammers. Impossible, Gixeval roared as he watched the cruiser's armor buckle. Those are primitive weapons, but the primitive weapons worked. The humans seemed to understand something that other species had forgotten. Sometimes a simple rock thrown hard enough could do more damage than the most advanced energy beam. Another human ship appeared, this one directly in front of the Iron Talon. Instead of firing and running like the others, it accelerated straight toward them. They're going to ram us, shouted the tactical officer. Evasive action, Gixeval ordered. But the Iron Talon was too large to move quickly. The human ship struck them amidships, its hull cracking open like an egg. But as it died, its reactor overloaded, creating a massive explosion that crippled the Korthak flagship's main engines. Damage report, Gixeval demanded. Engines at 30%? Weapons at 60%. And sir, we're detecting more human ships incoming. On the screen, Gixvol watched in horror as more human vessels approached. But these were not attacking. They were moving toward the wreckage of the ship that had rammed him. As he watched, they began picking up escape pods. They're rescuing their own people? Gixvol said in confusion. The communications officer nodded. It appears so, sir. Even after their ship was destroyed, they're saving the crew. This made no sense to Gixvol. In Korthak culture, warriors who lost their ships were considered weak. They were abandoned to die with honor. But these humans risked their own ships to save their defeated comrades. Sir, incoming transmission from the human admiral. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked older than most warriors Gixvol had faced, with gray hair and lines around her eyes. But those eyes were hard as iron. Warlord Gixvol, she said calmly. You have 30 minutes to evacuate all Korthak personnel from Zephys Prime. After that, any Korthak forces found on the planet will be considered hostile. Gixvol's pride flared. I do not take orders from primitives. This world belongs to the Korthak Empire. No, Admiral Chen said simply. It doesn't. She gestured, and new contacts appeared on his sensors. Hundreds of human ships were dropping out of hyperspace throughout the system. Not just warships, but transports, medical vessels, and massive construction platforms. You see, Warlord, you made a mistake. You attacked civilians. You hurt children. And you did it where humans could see. More human ships appeared, these ones, emerging from hyperspace dangerously close to Zephys Prime itself. Gixvol realized they had used the planet's gravity well to hide their approach, a maneuver so risky that most species would never attempt it. The thing about humans, Admiral Chen continued, is that we learned to fight on a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to use everything as a weapon. Gravity, asteroids, even our own ships if necessary. On Zephys Prime, human dropships were already landing. Gixvol could see them on his sensors moving toward Korthak positions with impossible speed and precision. But most importantly, the Admiral said, her voice growing colder, we learned that some things are worth dying for. And protecting innocence from monsters like you is definitely one of those things. Gixvol tried to restore his dignity. You may have won this battle, human, but the Korthak Empire is vast. We will return with 1,000 ships. Admiral Chen smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Actually, Warlord, you won't. Behind her, something massive was dropping out of hyperspace. It was not a ship. It was too big. As Gixvol watched, in growing horror he realized what he was seeing. It was a moon. A mechanical moon covered in weapons and armor moving under its own power. Allow me to introduce Luna, Admiral Chen said casually. Earth's moon. We've been working on it for a few centuries. Thought you might like to see it. The weaponized moon settled into orbit around Zephys Prime like a guardian taking its post. Its surface bristled with cannons that could destroy entire fleets. So here's what's going to happen, Admiral Chen continued. You're going to withdraw all Korthak forces from the system. You're going to return all Zephyrian prisoners. And you're going to send word to your empire that Zephys Prime is now under human protection. Gixvol stared at the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships and their impossible moon fortress. His own fleet was battered and scattered, outmaneuvered by enemies who fought like nothing he had ever encountered. And if I refuse? He asked. Admiral Chen's smile grew wider and much more frightening. Then we show you what 800 ships full of very angry humans can actually do. Sergeant Maria Santos crouched behind the ruins of what had once been a beautiful Zephyrian school. The purple stone walls were blackened with Korthak plasma burns, and the children's artwork that had decorated the halls was now ash on the wind. Recon. Report, she whispered into her comm unit. 3 Korthak squads moving through Sector 7, came the reply from Private Chen, positioned 2 blocks away. Heavy armor, standard formation. They're herding Zephyrian civilians toward the processing center. Santos felt the familiar cold anger settle in her chest. The processing center was where the Korthak took prisoners to decide who would be enslaved and who would be killed. She had seen the bodies outside, mostly the old and the very young. Rodriguez, what's your position? She asked. East side of the school, Sarge. I've got eyes on 6 more Korthak. They're big, but they move like parade soldiers. All straight lines and predictable patterns. Santos nodded. The Korthak were physically impressive. Each one stood over 8 feet tall with thick armor plating that could stop most weapons. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could hurt them. They had never fought humans before. Okay, people, listen up, Santos said to her squad. These Korthak think they're the top predators on this world. Time to show them what real predators look like. Santos had been born on Titan, where the methane storms could strip flesh from bone and the ice could shatter steel. She had learned to hunt in environments that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Her squad was made up of similar people. Humans from the edge worlds where survival meant adaptation and violence was just another tool. "Jackson, you're bait," she ordered. "Get their attention and lead them into the courtyard. Thompson and Lou, you take the high ground in the admin building. Rodriguez and I will flank from the east." "Sarge," Jackson said nervously, "these things are twice my size." Santos grinned, showing teeth that had been sharpened to points in the old Titan tradition. "Size doesn't matter, Jackson. Speed does, cunning does, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to win." She had learned that lesson fighting ice pirates in the outer system. The pirates had been bigger, better armed, and more numerous. But they had never faced humans who fought like their ancestors. Pack hunters who used their environment as a weapon and their intelligence as a shield. Jackson moved out, making just enough noise to attract attention. Within minutes, heavy footsteps echoed through the ruined streets as a Korthak patrol moved toward the sound. The lead Korthak was massive, his armor decorated with the skulls of defeated enemies. His weapon was a plasma cannon that could melt through tank armor. Behind him came 5 more warriors, each one a veteran of dozen conquered worlds. They moved in formation, covering each other with military precision. It was exactly what Santos had expected. They fought like civilized soldiers, following rules and tactics that had worked against every enemy they had faced. But they had never faced humans. Jackson appeared at the entrance to the courtyard, fired. A quick burst from his rifle, then ran. The Korthak roared and charged after him, their heavy boots shaking the ground. As they entered the courtyard, Thompson and Liu opened fire from above. But they didn't aim for the armor. That was too thick. Instead, they targeted the joints, the weak points, the gaps where armor met flesh. Their bullets were small compared to the Korthak's weapons, but they found their marks with deadly precision. The lead Korthak staggered as shots hit his knee joints. His armor could stop energy weapons, but human kinetic rounds punched through, like needles through cloth. "Impossible," the Korthak leader roared. "Our armor is impenetrable." "Yeah, well," Santos said as she appeared behind him. "You never met anyone stupid enough to get this close." She had crawled through the rubble while her squad kept them distracted, moving like the tunnel fighters of Mars. Now she was inside, their formation, where their heavy weapons couldn't target her without hitting each other. Her combat knife found the gap between the leader's helmet and chest armor. It was a small blade compared to Korthak weapons, but it was sharp, and she knew exactly where to put it. The leader fell, and confusion spread through his squad. They had been taught to fight in formation, to rely on their armor and superior firepower. They had never learned to adapt when the rules changed. Rodriguez appeared from the other side, his shotgun roaring as he fired armor-piercing rounds at point-blank range. The Korthak tried to turn their heavy weapons on him, but he was too fast, rolling behind cover before they could track him. Within minutes, it was over. 6 Korthak warriors lay dead in the courtyard, killed by 5 humans using tactics that would have horrified most civilized species. "Good work, people," Santos said, checking her ammunition. "Now let's go save some civilians." But as they moved toward the processing center, they discovered something that made Santos's blood run cold. The Korthak were not just killing adult Zephyrians. They were separating the children, loading them onto transport ships. "Slavers," Rodriguez spat. "They're taking the kids." Santos felt something dark and primal rise up inside her. On Titan, there was an old saying, "Touch the children and the ice comes for you." It meant that some crimes were so terrible that even the frozen hell of her homeworld would rise up to punish them. "Change of plans," she said into her comm. "All squads, new priority. The children come first. Everything else is secondary." Across the city, human Marines received the message and felt the same cold fury that had driven their ancestors to face impossible odds. They were no longer just soldiers following orders. They were pack hunters whose young had been threatened. Lieutenant Parker was pinned down by Korthak fire when he heard the message. He was outnumbered 3-1. His position was hopeless, and any sane person would have retreated. Instead, he smiled. "Johnson, you still have those mining charges from the asteroid belt?" "Yes, sir, but they're not military grade. They're just industrial explosives." "Perfect. Set them in the building foundations. When I give the signal, bring the whole block down on these bastards." Parker stood up and began walking toward the Korthak position, his rifle firing steadily. The alien's return fire sparked off his body armor, but he kept walking. He had grown up on Europa, where walking through a radiation storm was just another day at the office. The Korthak were so focused on the human walking into their guns that they never noticed Johnson placing charges in the buildings around them. When Parker finally dove for cover, the explosion brought down 3 city blocks. By the time the dust settled, Parker and Johnson were already moving toward the transport ships where the children were being held. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Human Marines used tactics that defied galactic military doctrine. They turned the Korthak's own size and strength against them, leading them into traps and kill zones where human cunning trumped alien firepower. Corporal Martinez used the Korthak's reliance on formation fighting to trick an entire company into a blind alley, then collapse the buildings on top of them. Sergeant Kim turned a Korthak firebase into a crater, using nothing but patience and a few carefully placed charges. But the most important victory came at the processing center, where Santos and her team found over 200 Zephyrian children locked in cargo containers. "Mama!" cried a small blue-skinned girl as Santos cut through the lock on her container. The bad things took Mama. Santos knelt down and looked the child in the eyes. "It's okay, little one. The bad things can't hurt you anymore. We're going to take you somewhere safe." As her team led the children to safety, Santos stayed behind to deal with the Korthak guards. There were 12 of them, all heavily armed and armored. Santos didn't care. These aliens had threatened children. On any human world, that meant only one thing. They all died. When the rescue ships found her an hour later, Santos was sitting calmly beside 12 dead Korthak, reloading her rifle. The children were safe, the guards were eliminated, and justice had been served in the ancient human way. "Casualties?" asked the medic who treated the minor wounds on her hands. Santos looked back at the processing center, where the last of the Zephyrian children were being helped onto medical transports. Some were orphans now, their parents killed in the first days of the invasion, but they were alive, they were safe, and they would grow up free. "None that matter," she replied. In orbit above the planet, Admiral Chen received reports from Marine units across Zephyrus Prime. The Korthak ground forces had been eliminated with ruthless efficiency. Not one human had been lost rescuing the children. Some might call it overkill. Some might say the humans had been too brutal, too willing to kill. Admiral Chen didn't care what anyone else thought. The children were safe. That was all that mattered. The pack hunters had found their prey, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened a human's adopted young. Warlord Gixval stood alone on the bridge of the Iron Talon, watching his empire crumble on the tactical display. Half his fleet was destroyed, or disabled. The other half was scattered across the system, running from human ships that fought like nothing he had ever seen. His communications officer was dead, killed when a human missile had somehow found its way through their shields. His tactical officer had fled in an escape pod after watching an entire squadron get destroyed by humans using asteroids as weapons. Now it was just Gixval and the dying hulk of his flagship, making one last orbit around Zephyrus Prime before his engines failed completely. Below him, the planet was already changing. Human ships swarmed over the surface like silver insects, but instead of destroying what they found, they were building. Massive construction platforms had appeared from nowhere, carrying prefabricated buildings and medical facilities. "Impossible," Gixval whispered. "No species brings construction equipment to a war." But the humans had. While their Marines were eliminating the last Korthak ground forces, their engineers were already rebuilding the cities they had liberated. It was as if they had planned not just to win the battle, but to heal the wounds it left behind. A new voice crackled through his damaged speakers. It was Admiral Chen again, but this time she sounded different. Less angry, more tired. "Warlord Gixval, this is your final warning. Surrender now and you will be given a fair trial under galactic law. Your surviving crew will be treated according to the conventions of war." Gixval laughed bitterly. "Fair trial? From the species that just destroyed my fleet with rocks and scrap metal? The same species that is currently providing medical aid to your wounded," Admiral Chen replied. "We have 3 of your ships in our rescue nets. Your crews are receiving medical treatment aboard our hospital ships." This stopped Gixval cold. He checked his own sensors and found it was true. Human vessels had indeed captured several Korthak ships that had been disabled in the fighting, but instead of destroying them, they were providing aid to the survivors. "Why?" Gixval asked. "We are your enemies. We destroyed this world. We killed innocents, because that's what civilized beings do," Admiral Chen said simply. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even when they've done wrong." even when there are enemies. On his screen, Gixval could see a human medical ship carefully extracting wounded Korthak from a damaged cruiser. The humans worked with the same efficiency they had shown in battle, but now they were saving lives instead of taking them. "I don't understand your species," Gixval said. "Most species don't," Admiral Chen admitted. "We're predators who chose to become protectors. We're survivors who decided that survival wasn't enough. We needed to help others survive too." Gixval thought about his own species, the Korthak Empire that had raised him. They had taught him that strength was everything, that the weak deserved to be conquered, that mercy was a flaw that would get you killed. But these humans had shown mercy to his crews while simultaneously destroying his fleet. They had been both more brutal and more compassionate than any enemy he had ever faced. "Your offer of surrender," Gixval said slowly. "What would happen to me?" "You would be taken to Earth for trial. If found guilty of war crimes, you would be imprisoned. If found innocent, you would be released. And if I refuse?" Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was sad rather than angry. "Then we will destroy your ship and recover your body for proper burial according to Korthak customs. Your crew will still be rescued and treated fairly." Gixval realized with shock that she meant it. Even if he fought to the death, these humans would still treat his people with honor. It was completely alien to everything he understood about war. "Admiral," he said finally, "I surrender." 3 hours later, Gixval found himself aboard the human flagship, the Terran Fury. He had expected to be thrown into a dark cell, maybe tortured for information about Korthak military secrets. Instead, he was given comfortable quarters and 3 meals a day. His wounds were treated by human doctors who worked with the same care they would show their own people. When he asked to speak with his surviving officers, his request was granted immediately. Most surprising of all, Admiral Chen visited him, personally. She was smaller than he had expected, this human who had destroyed an entire Korthak fleet. Without her uniform and command authority, she looked almost fragile, but her eyes still held that same iron determination. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "Apologize?" Gixval was confused. "For what?" "For the deaths of your people. War is always a tragedy, even when it's necessary." Gixval stared at her. "Admiral, my forces killed thousands of Zephyrians. We destroyed their cities, enslaved their children. Why would you apologize for stopping us?" Admiral Chen sat down across from him, suddenly looking very tired. "Because taking a life, even in defense of others, should never be easy. The moment we stop feeling regret for the necessity of killing is the moment we become monsters ourselves." She pulled out a small device and showed him a hologram. It was a picture of a young human girl with Admiral Chen's eyes and smile. "My daughter, Rebecca," Admiral Chen said. "She was killed in a pirate attack on Mars 20 years ago. I was commanding a patrol fleet 3 systems away. By the time we got the distress signal and made it back, she was already dead." Gixval looked at the image and felt something he had never experienced before: sympathy for an enemy. "I spent years hunting the pirates who killed her," Admiral Chen continued. "I told myself it was about justice, about protecting other families, but really it was about revenge. It took me a long time to learn the difference." "And now?" Gixval asked. "Now I fight to protect people like the Zephyrians. Not because I hate their enemies, but because everyone deserves the chance to live in peace." Admiral Chen put away the hologram and looked directly at Gixval. "That's why we're not going to stop with Zephyrus Prime. Every world your empire has conquered, every species you've enslaved, we're going to free them all." Gixval felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. "The empire has 1,000 worlds, Admiral. You have 800 ships." Admiral Chen smiled, but it was not the cold, frightening expression she had shown in battle. This smile was warm and full of hope. "Warlord, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. This fleet, these 800 ships, this is just the beginning. When word gets out about what happened here, every human in the galaxy is going to want to help." She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the massive construction effort surrounding Zephyrus Prime. Human ships continued to arrive, bringing supplies, equipment, and personnel for the rebuilding effort. "You see, humans have a weakness," Admiral Chen said. "When we see innocent people suffering, we can't just walk away. We have to help. We have to fix things. We have to make sure it never happens again." On the planet below, Gixval could see the first new buildings taking shape. Hospitals, schools, homes for the Zephyrian refugees. In a matter of days, the humans had not only liberated the world but begun healing it. What about my empire? Gixval asked. My people? Your people will be offered the same choice you were given, Admiral Chen said. Surrender and face justice, or continue fighting and face destruction. But either way, the Korthak Empire as it exists now is finished. She turned back to him, and Gixval saw something in her eyes that he had never seen in any warrior before. Genuine concern for his welfare. You can be part of building something better, Warlord. Your knowledge of Korthak military systems could help us liberate the enslaved worlds faster, with less bloodshed on both sides. Gixval thought about all the worlds his empire had conquered, all the species they had enslaved, all the children they had torn from their families. For the first time in his life, he felt something that his warrior culture had never taught him to recognize. Shame. What would you have me do? He asked. Admiral Chen smiled again. Help us save your people from themselves. Help us turn the Korthak Empire into something that protects instead of destroys. 6 months later, elder scientist Veltar stood in her new laboratory looking out at the rebuilt city of Zephys Prime. The human engineers had not simply reconstructed what was lost, they had made it better. The new buildings were stronger, more beautiful, and designed to house both Zephyrians and the human families who had chosen to stay and help. In the distance, she could see human children playing with Zephyrian young, learning each other's languages, and sharing their toys. Some of the human adults were former soldiers who had decided to become teachers or doctors instead of warriors. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Veltar activated her communication screen and saw Admiral Chen's face appear. Elder Veltar, the Admiral said, I have news from the former Korthak systems. The liberation of Althos 7th is complete. The Rigelian colonies have been freed, and I'm happy to report that we've received surrender offers from 12 more Korthak warlords. Veltar felt tears of joy running down her blue cheeks. Admiral, how can we ever thank you for what you've done? Admiral Chen's expression grew serious. Don't thank us yet, Elder. We still have work to do. There are rumors of other empires out there, other species that prey on the innocent. The galaxy is a big place, and there are always monsters hiding in the dark.